Hello everyone. Thanks for sitting in and coming to the campaign workshop. I'll stand over here. What I wanted to do is just give you a brief outline to start off with on what the campaign is really all about and why we're doing what we're doing. I'm sure you read all your letters and I'm sure you all know. And if I'm telling you stuff you already know, just stop me. But I just wanted to make it really clear on what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. Originally, we said there were three parties responsible for our thalidomide damage. And we said that was Diageo, originally distillers. We thought it was the British government, and we said it was Grünenthal. But as I'm sure you're all aware, Grünenthal is untouchable, and that just got proven recently in Spain when they won against the Spanish due to time limitation. So it's impossible to get to Grünenthal. Apart from time, we know that they are protected by the German government. One of the things that we noticed all around the world is that no thalidomiders around the world actually have ever had proper financial justice. So we decided to look into that. And as you know, the archives in Germany were opened after 50 years. So in we went, and what we found was very interesting. First of all, we found that the German government really has protected Grünenthal from ever being sued for thalidomide in Germany. That was number one, but we also found a couple of other things, which is what the whole campaign is about, which is why we're asking the German government. Now, we're not asking the German government for compensation, because when I talk to MPs, they use the word compensation, and I make it very, very clear to the MPs that what we're actually saying is we're not saying the German government must pay us because we're affected by thalidomide. What we're saying is that we feel the German government should pay us because we have unmet needs, and it is absolutely the responsibility of the German government that our health needs are actually unmet. And that's the whole focus of the campaign. Craig, sorry, I keep calling him Carl, I'm so sorry. Craig is going to talk about strategy a bit later on, but I wanted to talk to you just about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it in the UK. So, as with other campaigns, we go into Parliament, and I'm leading on the UK side, and we brief MPs one by one, and we give them the story. And what we basically tell the MPs is, first of all, I introduce myself to the MP, and I tell them that I'm a member of the National Advisory Council, and that NAC members are democratically elected by all of you, so that the MPs know that I'm not a random thalidomider coming to brief them, because there's nothing to stop any of you going to Westminster and talking to your MPs, but they need to know that there is a national campaign, and it's the national campaign we want the MPs to talk with, otherwise we'll become splintered, and that weakens our position. And then I talk about what the government did in 2009-2010, which was when we received the health grant. And so I tailor that, particularly if I'm talking to a Labour MP, I sort of gee up and thank them very much for their assistance. And I can't really go too far wrong, because if I'm talking to a Conservative or a Lib Dem, which is, I've only spoken to one Lib Dem since the Parliament, new government, I say, oh, thank you very much for extending it, which they did in 2012, for the further 10 years. I can't really go wrong, and every MP feels absolutely thrilled that they had a role in our health grant. The new MPs are very intrigued, and they want to know, and then they want to have the same participation as previous MPs. And so it's all very, very positive. And I've seen probably about over 150 MPs in the last year. Then I talked to them about the support that we're getting in Westminster, and I talked to them about, first of all, I talked to them about the responsibility of the German government. And I explained to them a couple of things that we found out in the files. There's many things we found out in the files, but there's two very specific things in the archive files that we found. And that was, first of all, the involvement of the federal government and the state government of Germany in the early termination of the criminal trial. So effectively, in 1961, when the drug was removed from the market, the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, where Grünenthal is based, raided the offices of Grünenthal, and they confiscated everything. And based on the evidence that they found, they issued criminal proceedings against Grünenthal for criminal negligence. And that was the basis of the court case from 1968 to 1970 in Germany. And then we all know that the court case closed prematurely. and a trust fund was set up called the Stiftung, and I'm going to refer to it as the Stiftung to separate it from our trust, and that everybody affected by Grunenthal became a member of that. And that's, I think, information that we all know, and I don't really need to talk about that. But what we actually found was that the president of the federal government of Germany in 1970, a man by the name of President Heinemann, and if I'm correct, he had before that been the justice minister, he tried to engage in secret negotiations with the state government and with Grunenthal themselves, defendants in the criminal trial, and also with the lawyers of Grunenthal to negotiate a payment outside of what was expected. So the average, the total sum of expected needs from the Germans was a figure of 1.2 billion Deutschmark. But President Heinemann negotiated a secret deal with Grunenthal that was a total of 100 million Deutschmark. It was only 13% of their calculated needs. And they were so desperate, the parents in Germany, that they settled with that. And of course, they didn't know anything that had gone on behind the scenes. Now, the Cologne Prosecution Service warned Heinemann to stop interfering in the criminal trial, but he continued interfering in the criminal trial, and there was this settlement. Now, where the German government breached its own constitution was actually some of the evidence we found in the trial was in the mid-50s, Grunenthal gave the drug to a company then called SmithKline French to trial it. And SmithKline French trialled it on about 800 members of their staff. Many members of their staff developed peripheral neuritis, which we all know is one of the side effects of thalidomide. And they had born to them 3 thalidomide babies. Based on that evidence alone, they rejected the drug and returned it back to Grunenthal. Now, Grunenthal had that information, and we know that the German government was aware of that information. And to terminate a criminal trial with evidence to prove criminal negligence is actually a breach of your own constitution. So that's what we hold the German government to, and that's one of our very strong points. We don't have an issue with SmithKline French, who are now GlaxoSmithKline. That's a completely separate story, and that would be a distraction. They're not responsible for the drug thalidomide. So that's why we believe the German government is responsible, and that is why we are going after them. So we're using our tactics, as usual, going into Westminster, briefing them one by one. So I've now given them that side of the story. I've already now thanked them for what they did for the health grant, and everybody is kind of getting G'd up to see what else they can do. Then I tell them about what we've done so far in the campaign. We've done lots of things. We have an open letter, and just recently you've all had a letter, and you've sent it off to your MPs. And as of 10 days ago, 156 of you returned your postcards to the Thalidomide Trust. I mean, that is absolutely phenomenal. In the last mail out, I think we had 303 postcards returned. So if you haven't done your letter, please send it off to your MP. It's got an open letter attached. And what that open letter is, it's an open letter to Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany. And it's asking her to come and meet with the Thalidomide Trust and discuss a package of financial assistance. We, to date, have 344, because I just had an email last night, 344 MPs have signed our open letter. So, I mean, that is a phenomenal amount of work, and that is a lot down to you guys writing to your MPs, and some of you have awkward MPs, and some of you have really challenged your MPs who are refusing to meet the campaign team. It's interesting when you send me your correspondence. It's really exciting seeing some of you taking on the fight for us. Liz Buckle works with me on the phones and on the email system that we have, and I'm quite sure Liz is cheering alongside me when we see some of these fantastic emails we get from you guys saying, look what I've written to my MP. It's like, yes, it's not just Liz and me doing it, but you guys are as well. Now, some of you may be aware that there's an early day motion out in Parliament at the moment, and that was started by an individual MP. And that's absolutely fantastic, because what that early day motion is asking for the British government to support all of us in our campaign. Now, some of you may have seen a little debate about this EDM, because members were asking all of you outside of the campaign team to chase your MPs to sign this early day motion. And the reason I was asking everyone not to chase your MPs is I want you to chase your MPs for the open letter, because it's the open letter that we are looking for on the campaign. That is our strategy. You can ask your MPs to sign that EDM. It's absolutely fine, but it's not part of our strategy at the moment. And we don't want burnout with the MPs because it's very, very easy for them to go, well, I've done one, I'm not going to do the other. And actually we have that scenario at the moment. We have MPs who are struggling to sign our open letter because they've signed the EDM. And what we want is, we want to get to 400 signatures on that open letter. Actually, we'd like to get to 600 signatures on that open letter. It's probably not going to happen because Cabinet and ministers are not actually allowed to sign the open letter. So we could get to 400. So we are still pushing with our open letter. We talk to the MPs about our health needs. And I don't know, but I'm sure every time I tell an MP the same story I told the previous MP, it's as fresh as the first time I ever said it, but for me it's getting a bit stale. So if anybody's got any intriguing stories you'd like me to pass to the MP, something kind of funny but poignant at the same time, a brief story, please share it with me, and I can look at maybe sharing that with an MP. You know, when I talk about knees going on beneficiaries who use their legs all the time, and how then that reduces our ability, that fascinates them. And just a little bit more of a story, if anybody wants to share anything with me. So in the UK Parliament, we've got two campaigns running, well, one campaign running, we've got one in the European Parliament and one in the UK. So I'm going to let Craig talk about the European side of it. But in the UK, we have met with David Lidington, who's the Foreign Office Minister, and he has supported us in getting our first meeting with the German government, which was held on the 7th of July. Now, Germany has these hierarchies, and we basically met with hierarchy 3. And hierarchy 1 is like our Secretary of State, and then they have a civil servant who has similar responsibilities. And then hierarchy 2 is our ministers, and then they have a civil servant with similar responsibilities. And then they have a hierarchy 3, and it's kind of like a political appointee, and we don't have that. So we don't have that position. But what that person did was they came, they met, and they advised us that the British government had responsibility for thalidomiders, and that the German government would like to tell the British government of its responsibilities. In other words, the German government has no responsibility towards thalidomide. So the Foreign Office is aware of that, and we've made it very clear to the Foreign Office and to the Health Department that any meeting that is held between the German government and the British government needs to be with us, because one of our founding principles is there's nothing about us without us. Because for the first pretty much 45 years of thalidomide, everything was done about us without us. And in the last 13 years, we've been there, and look at the changes in our fortunes and in our well-being. So we met with George Freeman. Now in the Health Department, we have Alistair Burt, who is the Minister. Of course, we have Jeremy Hunt, who's the Secretary of State. And Alistair Burt has given the remit to a man called George Freeman, who is also a minister. And we met with him the other day. But we took along with us Norman Lamb. And if any of you remember who Norman Lamb is, he was the Lib Dem minister who brought us our health grant for a further 10 years. So for him, it was a very emotional moment for him. He came back into the Department of Health. He's one of only 6 Lib Dems in the whole of Parliament. And we were walking down the office to meet George Freeman the other day. And we walked past Norman Lamb's old office, and he sort of stuck his head in the room and he was going, "Hello, boys," and everyone was very, very happy to see him. He had a little tear in his eye. But he did say to George Freeman, the minister, he warned him that he should be audacious within the department. And the civil servants who were there, we have a very supportive civil servant by the name of Zawar Patel, and unfortunately he's just removed himself from our remit. He's been taken away from our remit, but I suspect that he's actually going to keep his eye on all of us. And he also advised that David Cameron, number 10, and the Foreign Office were aware of the current meeting that was being held, and they wanted to know what George Freeman's commitment to us was going to be. So George Freeman didn't give us what his commitment was going to be, but he's realising that he's got a massive amount of pressure coming from number 10 and the Foreign Office to support us, as well as from Norman Lamb. Norman Lamb spoke incredibly well to George Freeman and made it pretty clear that he also needed to be completely engaged in our campaign. He also warned George Freeman that it wasn't going to be very easy to ignore us, because as we write to our MPs, and your MPs write to George Freeman, he's going to start getting a pile of letters. And when Norman Lamb took over as MP, his pile of letters was just so big. I think it was, coming up off the floor. I'm not joking, probably to about sort of 2 foot, 3 foot high of letters that MPs sent. So we want to do the same to George Freeman, and we will let you all know exactly how and when we do it. That is the thrust of the campaign at the moment. As I said, I phone up the MPs along with Liz. For a little while we had a couple of other helpers, outsiders, and sometimes we have Miles, who's in the finance meeting, and Helen Shaw, who makes phone calls with me as well, phone calls with us as well. And we phone your MPs all the time to get meetings. So if you get an email from me asking for help, please respond to it, and please get in touch with your MPs if you feel like you want to. If you don't feel that you're able to get in touch with your MPs, just get in touch with me and we will push your case further. On a final note, we have on the postcards, you're allowed to send back whether you want us to have your details or not. And what I'm aware of is that some of you don't want us to know anything about where you live or anything, but it would be so helpful if we just knew your name. Because when I speak to an MP and I say, your constituent has sent back their letter, but I don't know their name, they actually don't know how to start looking for you in their system because they have filed it, 2 months ago or whenever. I very rarely ever give them. I explain to them that I don't have your details because of data confidentiality and because I'm a beneficiary. And because I'm a beneficiary, data confidentiality is, obviously we know what that's all about. But if I could just have your name, they can find you in the pile. So those of you who've sent back saying, no, you don't want to share your details, would you just consider saying on that card, happy to give my name, something like that, so that we can find who you are, please. That's would you agree, Liz? Yeah. Is there anything else that we need to ask beneficiaries to do regarding their details? There isn't really, is there? No? Okay, so I think we're doing questions and answers afterwards. Is that right, Craig? Yeah? So if you've got any questions, hold on. Craig's going to talk about the European side of the Parliament. And then I'll come back and talk about the media.
Thanks, Mikey. She and the team are just doing a really good job. When we were in George Freeman's office last week, Norman Lamb spoke, as Mikey says, spoke very well. But one thing he said was these group of campaigners are the best campaigners, or the most persistent campaigners I have ever come across. Now, we've heard a very similar thing in the European Parliament. We took a group of Italians, it was the Italian week, Italians to the European Parliament last November. And again, twice in that week, we had Italian MEPs saying exactly the same thing about our campaign. In fact, one of them told a lawyer who's working with the Italians, who is a personal friend of this lawyer, he said, this group of people in the European Parliament, he said, they are just the most phenomenal campaigners. Everybody around the European Parliament is saying that they know we're not going to go away, and also that our tactics are very effective. And I'm not taking personal credit for that. I'm just part of a team here, but we have formed what we are told is a very effective team, because we are just fired by this sense of injustice, and we're not going to give up. My role over the last couple of years has been involved in the European Parliament. Honestly, the European Parliament is a massive, massive building with endless offices, 650 MEPs. Every single door we have knocked on more than once. In the very early stages of the campaign, we were simply getting PAs, and we were getting blank faces and what's this thalidomide or Contigan Softenon, it's all got different names. What's this got to do with us? But we carried on, we persisted, we told the stories, we spent time briefing MEPs. There was one time I went to an office and I got somebody, I went into my spiel and he said, wait a moment, he said, I'm just a builder. He said, this office is being renovated. And he said, but tell me the story because it's fascinating. I was handing him a leaflet. I took the leaflet back because they're precious commodities, but I told him the story. Honestly, in those early days, we were trudging around offices. My feet were absolutely sore at the end of every single day. And eventually, we found ourselves getting appointments with MEPs because they were obviously impressed with our story. And by the end of the year, we had got to the point where we were, as I say, starting off by simply speaking to PAs, trying to get an appointment with MEPs. We got to the point at the end of last year where the European Parliament is separated into political groups. You may well be aware. So obviously it's different to the UK Parliament in the sense that we have parties we vote for. Conservative MEPs are part of the ECR group in the European Parliament. Labour, together with other MEPs of a similar persuasion. Labour MEPs, your vote may be for a Labour MEP. If they get to Parliament, they're part of the S&D group, together with similarly aligned politicians from other countries. So in the European Parliament, there are 7 different political groups. And by the end of last year, we got to the point where the president of those groups agreed to sign an open letter to the German government of all 7 groups, which was hugely impressive. At the end of the beginning, people said we wouldn't achieve it, especially the largest group, the EPP, because the EPP is very dominated by Germans. But what we did in the EPP, just to give you an example, we started off PAs, got them on our side. Then we focused on heads of department. Each country has got its own sort of head of department, so we focused on the head of department. Then on the coordinators, then on the vice presidents, and each group's got many vice presidents, one from each different nation. We got them slowly on our side, putting pressure on the Germans. There was occasions in which I would do the 15th floor in G building, which is where the Germans reside, and I was getting blank faces, I was getting closed doors to begin with. Which is another story in itself, because it is fascinating. You know, we've got our own stereotypes of kind of European characteristics, and it's all there in miniature in the European Parliament. So you go around G building, for example, you start from 15th floor, and the Germans are all working in their offices with their sandwiches by their desk at lunchtime, as you'd expect Germans. You go to the Italians and the Spanish, and they're all off for their long siestas, and they're never there. And then you get the Swedes and the Dutch are interesting because all their doors are open and it's a kind of come in, talk, you know. And it is fascinating. It's fascinating. You've got a microcosm of Europe there, and all the national characteristics are there for you to see. But again, you know, we were working hard. We were putting increasing pressure on the Germans through the other countries. And so we got to the end of last year, and the president of the EPP, Manfred Weber, eventually agreed to meet us. He listened, to give him credit, because we've got a lot of Germans on our side now, very much on our side. But he listened, he took a couple of months to make up his mind, and he came out fully in support of us, and he was willing to sign the open letter to the German government, but to his own government, and he's a CDU MEP, the largest party in Germany. We've got a character called Matthias Grüter, who's part of the S&D, which is the kind of the group that our Labour MEPs are in, and he's become one of our greatest supporters. So we had a press conference last year, and I've just realised I keep forgetting to move this thing ahead. I'm sorry. Matthias Grüter actually was on the stage and appeared on the stage speaking on our behalf. Again, a German MEP. So the endless door knocking has achieved a huge amount. We got within a year, we got much further than we thought we'd get. At the end of last year, I've already kind of touched on this. My early responsibility as part of the campaign team was to work with the Spanish, the Italians, and the Swedes. We were told at a very early stage, you know, if you can bring thalidomide survivors from different countries, your people will listen to you far more clearly, more closely than they are doing right now. So we took that on board. We brought a group of Spanish. We got 1 week. The following week we brought a group of Italians, and the following week we brought a group of Swedes. And we took them round all the doors. We tired them out. We actually exhausted them. We took them round all their MEPs. Every single door we knocked on, and we said, here's a group of Italians. We'd like you to speak to them. Of course, they can't say, no, we're not going to speak to Italians. They can say, no, we're not going to speak to you because you're not Italian, although most of them don't. But they can't refuse to speak to their own people in their own language. So, and we were meeting, because we were taking large groups of obviously visibly affected, thalidomide-affected people around the European Parliament, but MEPs, by the end of those 3 weeks, were stopping us in corridors and saying, I've just signed the open letter, it's great, and we got some really significant big hitters on board during those weeks, especially one particular Spanish vice president who's now taking huge initiatives on our behalf, but I'll come to him in a minute. Open letter I've just mentioned. Following this milestone, the 7 political groups, we thought, well, let's have a press conference. So we approached a couple of the groups, asking them if they would co-sponsor a press conference. Actually, all of them decided they wanted to play a role in that. We had people fighting over being who was going to be on the platform. One particular member was very upset that there wasn't enough chairs for him to be on the platform and speak on our behalf. But the press conference was very widely attended, had MEPs from every single party and some significant MEPs speaking up at that press conference, simply announcing that we had all 7 political groups signing an open letter. It is so rare to get all 7 political groups agreeing on anything in the European Parliament. And it was just a major milestone, and everybody was listening, hearing what our message, because it was being said by all the groups in the Parliament. Over the last couple of years, we've had actually 4 meetings with, when I say the Health Commissioner, it's been 2 different Health Commissioners. The previous Health Commissioner, Commissioner Borges, he met with us 3 times, and we were told during the 3rd meeting that he has never met any other group more than twice. We were the only group during that Parliament that he met 3 times. And that's because he was so supportive of what we were trying to do. But that doesn't mean we didn't have to fight very hard with him. We had to convince him, first of all, and it took quite some time to convince him that he was able to act. There is a principle known as the principle of subsidiarity in the European Parliament, which basically simply means this: the European Parliament can't intervene on an issue that is a national government issue. So first of all, you have to convince them that this isn't just a national issue, this is a European issue. And we got legal advice on that. We actually, there was, I wasn't part of this particular journey, but there was one occasion on which we were made aware that there was a particular professor in a university, I'm trying to remember which one it was, maybe it was Oxford, I think it was Oxford, that was a specialist on European law, and we needed to contact him. And it so happened that on the Eurostar on the way home, was it Guy or was it you and Nick, happened to sit right next to somebody who knew him. He gave us significant advice on how to engage the Health Commissioner, and he basically said, well, if you can prove to the Health Commissioner that it's a current ongoing health need, in other words, it's not just in the past, it's in the present, then he has to listen to you. So he set up some robust hurdles we had to cross, and we succeeded in doing that. So the current Health Commissioner, Andrea Kaitis, who's a Lithuanian, has met with us once, and we've got a follow-up meeting on the 9th of November with one of his staff. He is already at a health conference of health ministers. He's already taken the German representative on one side and said, this is something you need to seriously consider dealing with in your country. So we're going to find out from him next month the initiatives that he's willing to take on our behalf. But again, he's really committed to helping us. He's said to us very clearly, this is an issue that must be settled. We've met also with Martin Schulz, the President of the European Parliament. Again, there's so much support from all the different parties, seven signatures on an open letter from all the presidents. President Schulz, we asked if we could meet him. That was actually quite a straightforward, getting that meeting was actually far more straightforward than we thought. So much so that his health advisor, a Dutch man by the name of Kokok, who Nick calls Knock Knock, he asks, every now and then, he asks us, will you please just give me 10 minutes next time you're in the Parliament just to update us on how you're doing. So we've met with Martin Schulz. He's doing some behind the scenes asking of questions within the European Parliament. Within the German government, he's talking to people on our behalf. Obviously, there's a limit to how involved he can get, but he's again very supportive. And then at the end of September, we were actually invited by the European Commission at their expense, a couple of us, to go over there and take part in a conference which celebrated the 50th anniversary of the first EU drug legislation. And the first person to speak at the conference was Kevin Donnellan, who did a really good job. I mean, you know Kevin, he's such a character, and he spoke very eloquently and very much from his heart. And there were several of us, again, on expenses. We were expensed, we were allowed in on their expense, simply allowed to mill around and to talk to all the various different people. And there's a few people that we're following up. Somebody I met was the associate editor of a Politico magazine, which is a significant political publication in Brussels, and we're going to meet him when we go over next month as well. So we made some. We were very much guests of honour at that conference, and there were sort of 300 or 400 significant people there, including MEPs, who again saw us supporting something that was their initiative. Rather than us going on our own terms, we were willing to go on their terms and to support them in this celebration that they were putting on. So again, actually, we're just taken very seriously. That's last year. That's what we've been doing over this last year. It feels like we've done a huge job, but we haven't yet got to the end of what we want to accomplish. This current year, what we're doing is this. We are, actually this slide needs updating. It changed the other day. We are pursuing a critical motion through the European Parliament criticising the current German government, criticising the previous German government and asking the current German government to put right this terrible wrong that happened all those years ago. We're not now taking it through the ENVI committee, we're taking it through the party route. And again, the reason we're not taking it through this committee is because there's one Spanish MEP, Esteban González Pons, who was so enraged when we took the Spanish around with us, and is even more enraged now that the Spanish have lost their appeal, that he is saying, he said to us, right, I am going to take the initiative, I'm going to push this motion through. We gave him the idea of a motion, but he said, I'm going to push it through, I'm bringing people, supporters on board, and so we were going around the offices asking that for their support for our idea, and they were saying, well, Pons has already come to us. He's already said to us, will you support this initiative that I'm proposing? So we're now saying, well, there's no point in us spending a lot of our time and effort when he is willing to do this on our behalf. And he is a former Spanish minister. He's a vice president of the Parliament, and together with some other significant big hitters, he's very much fighting our corner for us. I mentioned this character from Politico. He's a very smart cookie. I'm really looking forward to meeting with him to get something significant in the Brussels press. And of course our ongoing meetings with the Health Commissioner I've already referred to. But those are our priorities for the next year. There will be others added to that, but those essentially are where we're beginning this 2016 with focusing on. So we think that the stuff that Mikey and her team are doing within the British Parliament, I mean, in a sense, they're the easiest to deal with because they're already fully on board. They have been for a long time. But the reason we're also pursuing the European Parliament route is because we know that the German government want to be seen as good Europeans. And that's where we can embarrass them the most, potentially. We don't think we're going to get, that's not where the biggest pressure is going to be exerted, but we think ultimately that's where they're going to be embarrassed the most. That's the reason we're doing these two things at the same time. Mikey?
Thanks, Craig. I hope that sort of gives a bigger picture on what we're doing on both sides. Have you now finished, Craig, or you're going to come back? Yeah, you've got tactics, a strategy. I wanted to only touch on media, but actually, I can't believe it. I forgot to mention something really important that's gone on in the UK side. David Cameron has a thalidomide-affected constituent, which is absolutely brilliant. And Nick Dobrik met David Cameron with the beneficiary as an MP who happens to have privileges because he's the Prime Minister. David Cameron was fully briefed and he knew exactly what we were doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it. And he's actually written to us asking to be kept updated on the campaign. So just so that everyone knows, Cameron really does know what's going on. We just have to make sure that the pressure keeps on so that David Cameron supports us. outwardly. I mean, he supports us as an MP and quietly, but we're pushing him to give us that public support. So we have got everybody on side. Okay, I'm only going to talk very, very briefly about the media, only really briefly. We have quite a few big media people interested in our story. And of course, it's all about communication and making sure that when we have a story that we get it to them. But just so that you know, and Guy Tweedy is actually mainly responsible for the media. I don't know if any of you know the work that Guy has done. He's sort of got Billy Burton out of prison. He helped get Mark out of Billy out of the Philippine prison, and he's got somebody out of a New York prison. And Guy's one of those people that when somebody says no to him, he doesn't understand it, so he just keeps on going till eventually they give up and say yes. Anyway, so we have Panorama on side, and Panorama is working alongside Tobias. I don't know if any of you have met Tobias today. I know Tobias is here in the guise of Edric. Tobias is here, and he's worked very closely with us for many years. And if you actually talk to Tobias when you're outside and find out how Tobias came into joining us, our merry band, and the amount of work that he's done, he's our main researcher. He goes into the archives and digs around. So he's working alongside a friend of ours in France and in Germany in the archives. We have Newsnight interested in doing story as well. We have the Times, and we have the Sunday Times. We have the Guardian, and we have Der Spiegel in London. We've got some interest in a German TV, but I've only got a question mark against that. So I don't actually know what that means, but I think there's something possibly will happen in Germany. But the other thing is that the media contact us. We get contacted by the Sun and the Mirror and the Mail and blah-de-da-de-da. And I would like to give them other people's details, and I don't really know who else to farm these calls out to. So if anybody is really interested in getting their story out there, usually they want to sort of see how amazing we are and how brave we've been in life. But whenever we do that, we always try to point them back in the direction of the campaign, so it's, get our message across. So anybody who does, if any media, any local media gets in touch with any of you, please get in touch with us just to make sure that when you give your story, you give the message of the campaign as well, so that Grunenthal gets out there. Call the Midwife are going to do, they've announced episode 1, episode 5 and episode 8 will feature thalidomide. I don't know if you're all aware of that. And thank God it's actually going to give a bit more of the side of the parents' view, because of course it was all about the parents between 1958 and 1961. It wasn't about us. It only became about us as we grew up and began to function as people rather than just as babies. So they're going to be doing the story too, and they're very much in touch with us. And there was an article in The Sun not so long ago, and actually we coordinated that with the Call the Midwife team. We're actually talking to the producer and the writer, so you don't get any higher in the Call the Midwife team than the people we're talking with. And the same, with Panorama Newsnight. I'm really cross. I went to the Brett film. There was only 5 thalidomiders who turned up at the Brett screening. Elaine was one of them. And it was brilliant because Roger Grafe was there. He was the writer. He was the person who did the film. But this lady came over. I was talking to Brett, and she was the main head of BBC One. Brett had just asked me a question, and I'm so sorry, everyone. I turned to speak to Brett, and I looked back, and she had gone. So it's like, damn it, I couldn't believe that I'd missed that opportunity. But I know a way of getting back hold of her and bring back the story. And of course, she loved the story of Brett and thalidomide, and I'm quite sure we'll be able to sell her a story as well to make sure that we stay in the headline news and whatever. So that is the idea of that's what's going on with the media. Anybody else who wants to be part of it, please. It's not all about the people who you always see in the paper. We just don't know how to get hold of you. We don't know who else wants to be involved. So if you want to be involved, or if you want to give a story, please let us know. And I'm going to hand over finally to Craig, who's going to talk about tactics and strategy.
Okay, this is me as Nick Dobrick again. And I'll try and stand in one place in case the spirit of Nick Dobrick takes me over. So the tactics are from the master, as you would imagine. I've just to say a word about Nick. He's just a phenomenon. He's a force of nature, Nick is. And it's just been fascinating working with him and others. I mean, it's not just him, but I mean, he is just, he wakes up in the morning and he thinks strategy, he thinks campaign. He's just all the time, I mean, on a trip to Europe with him, all the time he's thinking about different scenarios, different possibilities, what if this, what if that. Now, I'm the sort of person, I'm a big picture thinker, but I'm the sort of person of, how do we deal with the thing that's ahead of us and connect it to the bigger picture? He's always thinking about things that might or might not happen. And it absolutely exhausts me. I get on my train back to Sheffield after a trip to Europe, and I am absolutely exhausted with the amount of brain power he puts into this. So he's very much, as you know, he's very much living and breathing this all the time, and he's exhausting at times as well. But I've got the utmost respect for him. So these are essentially his notes, transferred from the back of an envelope onto some slides. We have, as you can already see, we have overwhelming political support. I mean, to be honest, listening to what Mikey was saying and then listening to myself speak, I just think, I can't believe we've achieved what we've achieved in this short period of time. But yet, in a sense, we've achieved nothing because we haven't achieved our ends yet. So, you know, great, you know, we've come a huge way in such a short time. And Nick keeps on saying, he keeps on reminding us, we're going to have hurdles, we're going to fall over a couple of times, at this point, we haven't yet reached a major disappointment. We've had our disappointments, but we haven't yet reached a major disappointment that's made us think again. He keeps reminding us that it'll probably happen, but as I say, at the moment it's not happening. We've got overwhelming political support. And that is because we have been building from the ground upwards. So just as I explained in the European Parliament, we start off by visiting the offices of PAs. I mean, PAs are people who other campaigns seem to think are unimportant. To us, they're not unimportant. They are the people who will say, we've had some disabled people visiting our office and they've got a really compelling case and you need to listen to them. So we will give PAs a lot of time, a lot of our time, because we know they're important people. So we've got, every time we're in the European Parliament, because obviously that's all I can speak of, we get people stopping us in the corridor, hi, how you doing? Come and sit down with me, come and have a coffee. And how is it going? All the time people are doing that to us because they know us so well. We also have irrefutable evidence, which again, you know, if we were just making a big noise and firing off in all sorts of different angles, then people wouldn't take us seriously. If we were just demonstrating and causing havoc, people wouldn't take us seriously. We have irrefutable evidence that the German government has a responsibility. And I tell you, working with Tobias is a real privilege, because again, here is another man who is driven and is focused on getting a breakthrough for us. He's come to us and he said, I want to support you in this campaign that you're involved in. He's not a thalidomide survivor himself, but I tell you, he is one of the most committed individuals I've ever met, who's going around at fairly minimal cost, I have to say, going around Germany and now France for us, determined to root out those details which are going to win this campaign for us. So I just honour you, Tobias, for everything you're doing for us. He's the most remarkable and charming individual, I have to say. So this evidence that we're building up and we're still adding to is quite, shocking, but it's irrefutable. And we have therefore gained significant influence over decision makers. And those are the three things that essentially we need to win a campaign. And obviously the first two, I don't know how we can improve the first two. It's the third one currently, this influence over decision makers. We keep on saying, Nick and I keep on saying to each other, Merkel or somebody under her just needs to wake up one morning and says, we just need to deal with this thalidomide problem. And it could be dealt with tomorrow, but it probably won't be. But one day, somebody's going to wake up and say, we need to sort this. But until then, we carry on gaining influence and doing all that we've been doing. Our three principles are these. Mikey's already alluded to this, shared responsibility. We say to everybody, look, I call it the three pots argument. There are three pots into which individual groups need to contribute. We've got a contribution from Diageo, and we continue to maximise that, which I was talking about earlier on. The UK government has finally faced up to its responsibility a number of years ago and shows every sign of continuing to support us. Certainly, we're there all the time, and they know our faces. But the third group is the German government. And that's the one that we come to them and we say, look, we're not asking you for everything. It's too late for a legal settlement. We're not saying we want millions of pounds in damages, because we're just saying, look, these are our health needs. We can demonstrate that they're real and legitimate, and there's a shortfall, and you have a responsibility for meeting it. So shared responsibility. Again, I think Mikey has referred to all of these, but we want service. We need services that suit us, that fit around our needs. We've all got our own experience of the National Health Service, wonderful as it is. But our experience very often is they don't understand us. And actually, the reason they don't understand us is because we're all so different. But we've now got a huge body of experience out there of we've all found things that work for us. And therefore, it's not that's the reason we fought so hard. And when I say we, I wasn't involved in that, so I'm not taking credit. But we as a team fought hard to insist that that our health grant was money that we could use however suited us. That was a big battle that had to be fought. Services fit around our needs. And then thirdly, nothing about us without us. We do recognise that at times politicians need to speak on their own in a room, but we always insist. We want to debrief, we need to have a contribution to this. We don't want you deciding something behind our backs and then presenting us with a fait accompli which doesn't suit us. So again, a phrase that we use frequently is nothing about us without us. We need to be involved. Tactics. Everywhere we go, we demonstrate that we have widespread support. It's the reason we brought those Spanish, Italians and Swedes to the European Parliament, but it's also the reason why whenever we want to make any move, I speak about the European Parliament because it's what I know, whenever we make any move within the European Parliament, we can point to a Polish MEP, we can point to a Spanish MEP, we can tell the Spanish story, we can point to an Italian MEP, we can find an MEP from a different committee that to talk. There's one particular MEP at the moment who doesn't think he needs to speak to us. So we're saying, well, I tell you what, there's someone in your party, Jill Evans and her PA, they've told us to come and see you. So you go and speak to them, because we've briefed them so thoroughly over so many months that we know that they will tell the same story that we're telling you. So you go and talk to them. If they don't convince you, we'll meet with you later. So we've got so much support from all sorts of different from different parties and from different persuasions. When you've got the Greens on one end and the EPP, the Conservatives and the ECR on the other, all saying exactly the same thing, you know that you've got widespread support. The evidence that we have is embarrassing, let's face it. It's so embarrassing that we always have to say wherever we go, we're not anti-German, and we're not holding this current German government responsible. It's the previous government. But they have an opportunity, we think a responsibility, to put it right. And again, we're trying to embarrass the target to do the right thing. The embarrassment is all there, and we have all the evidence that we need. We're told that the Germans respond to a rational argument rather than emotional blackmail or emotional arguments, and certainly we're seeing a lot of evidence of that in the European Parliament. They don't like to be pressurised emotionally, and various advisors are telling us that. So therefore, that's why we're marshalling an argument based on facts and based on logic and based on lawyers' letters and everything else. That's why we're targeting the campaign as we are. We have bottom-to-top support. Well, I've demonstrated that already. We're always reminding ourselves that these are the things that we need to avoid. And I think this is where sometimes campaigns have gone wrong in the past. Just in general. This is where campaigns tend to flounder. We inwardly are so angry, we are angry, and we could allow ourselves to become very bitter. But if we betray that, then we will get nowhere, because we will just be firing off in all different directions. And so we have to focus our anger and our determination, we have to focus it upon the targets that or upon the arguments that we've brought together. So we recognise that we always have to be respectful. I mean, I've been kicked out of offices by not just by Germans, but a couple of Germans I can think of. I've been kicked out by offices, and I just write a very polite email to them and say, I'm sorry, you were obviously so busy you weren't able to see me. Next time I'm in the Parliament in a month's time, it'd be great if we could meet then. One of the characters who actually had a stand-up argument with Nick Dobrik about 18 months ago is now one of our greatest supporters, again another German MEP. We recognise that there are times when we go to an office and they are just too busy to see us, and it's not because they don't agree with us. But again, we could, if we wanted to, get very angry, and we are the most important thing in this Parliament. We recognise that we're not. We are the most important thing in our worlds, but not in theirs. So we have to be respectful, and we have to allow ourselves to recognise that that we're in it for the long game, and we need to be careful to avoid the anger and recrimination being used in the wrong way, and also avoid too many targets. An example of this is that in the early days, not just with the Health Commissioner, as I referred to earlier on, but in other places as well, we had people coming to us and saying, well, yes, of course, it's the legal argument. It's the legal route, trying to point us towards sorting it in law. And we kept having to say, look, there is no longer a legal argument. If we try a legal route, it will be, as the Spanish have recently found. I mean, I'm sure you're all aware, the Spanish story is the most shocking story. Grunenthal, they were forced to withdraw the drug in 1961. They carried on selling it in Spain for a further 5 years, knowing that it was killing babies and disabling others. They knew exactly what it was doing. They took advantage of the fact they didn't have to provide the paperwork during the Franco regime. They were found guilty in court, and they weren't able to appeal the facts. They got the decision based on the fact that the case was brought too late. And we just say to the German government, the reason the course was brought too late is because you brought the trial to an end. And that information that they needed and that we needed got buried in an archive for 30 years. And so we bring the legal argument. They try and say, well, you just need to sue the German government, or you need to sue Grunenthal. And we say, well, the Spanish have tried. They can't do it. We can't do it either because the Grunenthal are protected by law. And we draw the argument back from the legal to the moral and to the German government responsibility. So again, too many targets is a distraction, and we bring it back to the one focus, time and again, German government responsibility. And then the third is demoralisation. I mean, there are times when this is very tiring. It's hugely tiring. It's a massive privilege to be involved in this, but it's very tiring. And there are times when we do think, you know what, I really thought that would achieve more than it has achieved or seems to be achieving. But we pick ourselves up, we get on the phone again and we gee ourselves up, and Nick is just so good at this. Okay, this is the next step. We mustn't get demoralised, we carry on. So these are the things we're always seeking to avoid. And then finally, the final words are these. If ever, I just had the question down there, how much longer is this going to last? And if Nick was standing here, what would he say? He said it so many times. 2 years. 2 years ago, Nick was saying 2 years. 18 months ago, Nick, we don't know how long this is going to last. As I said, it may well be, Merkel could wake up tomorrow morning and say this needs dealing with. The fact is, she's currently dealing with migrants and VW. Those are the big things on her plate right at the moment, and our story is not the biggest thing. And actually, it's going to be one of her colleagues that's going to be dealing with this ultimately anyway, even though we're focusing on her. But, this could be 2 years away, it could be a week away, but we think we're always planning for the 2 years. We're saying within a couple of years, we believe we'll get this sorted. We can't promise. Of course we can't promise. We're just doing our best. We constantly anticipate possible scenarios and potential delays. That's just, we need to do that in order to retain our sanity. And the final thing I want to say is, well, thank you for your help. As Mikey has said, you're writing letters, and that's just really, really helpful. That is significantly helpful on the UK side. But just thank you for your help, thank you for your interest and for your support, because it really means a huge amount to us. Thank you.
Obviously from Australia, so this is from the Australian point of view, and it's a question for Craig. Just Do you think, Craig, that the campaign in the European Parliament that you're conducting for the UK thalidomiders and the European thalidomiders, do you think that's going to translate into assistance for non-European thalidomiders? So, for example, people in Australia, New Zealand, Japan and other places?
Very good question. I guess the first thing to say is we can't even say that we're fighting currently on behalf of European thalidomiders. We are currently fighting on behalf of those who are outside the Kontergan Stiftung, the German settlement, for those who are in a situation similar to ours. We're doing that because obviously we have solidarity that provides, we're focused, we're all in the same boat, we're all in the same place, we all have the same argument. But yes, most certainly, we are convinced that, for example, that our health grant that we won a number of years ago had an impact on the Canadian situation and the German situation. So in the past, Nick and Guy have gone to Germany and helped them achieve their uplift. We're not fighting on behalf of them currently, but we are all one big family. We are convinced that the arguments that we propose, or the arguments that we are arguing within the European Parliament and the UK Parliament, they apply more widely as well. So absolutely, we can't fight on behalf of groups, outside of our particular cabal of four groups, but absolutely, there is stuff that we're uncovering which is just as relevant to others as well. So yeah, I mean, we are any little victory that any of us get is potentially to the benefit of others, and we're not ignoring that fact. We're aware of that fact. Yeah.
I've got two questions actually. Well, one's a statement at the end. What was the reason there was a undercover between the German government and Grunenthal? What was the trigger mechanism for that, and why?
So I didn't catch the question.
Grunenthal. Why did the government basically cover up with Grunenthal?
Why did the government cover up? The difficulty, of course, is that you never know someone's intentions. Reading the documents, they could say, by bringing the trial to an end, is simply a way of delivering money to the German thalidomiders quicker. This will go on for many, many years. The children need the money now. Let's bring it to an end. We say, well, okay, if that was your serious intention, then you wouldn't have said, and we've got the minutes of the meeting that said it. The German government said, we think 1.5 billion Deutschmarks is a fair payment, but how much can you afford, Grunenthal? 100 million? Okay, 100 million's fine. If their intention had truly been to deliver money to German survivors, they probably wouldn't have agreed to 13% of what they thought was a fair figure. But again, you can never be certain of what somebody else's intentions are. All we can know, again, because that will just make us angry. Yeah, you can. All we can do is to point out, look, for whatever reason this was done, this is the effect upon us now.
And another question.
Can I answer that in a little bit? Go straight to the point, really. Craig is quite right. We don't know why they did really what they did, but we do know more of the history of thalidomide. We do know a little bit more about the people involved in Grunenthal and who they were. And as we know, we've heard of Otto Ambros, who was, I can never remember what his title was, science advisor, medical advisor, maybe Tobias might be able to remind me of his actual title. What was Otto Ambros in Grunenthal? What was his title?
He was the head of the Aufsichtsrat, which is... Sorry. Well, Otto Ambros was the head of the Aufsichtsrat, which is the supervising body. From 1971 on, when the company grew to the size that they legally were obliged to have such a body, which they hadn't been before.
Okay.
And he was the managing director of a company that Grunenthal acquired an important share, exactly with the thalidomide money in 1959. 1959, 1960, which is called Knoll.
Okay, but he was also involved with Grunenthal, and he was also, there was a connection with him, and he was a Nazi. This is going back to the Nazi story. So why would the German government do what they did back? And we're not making accusations, although we are. But if Dr. Martin Johnson has written a book more about the history of thalidomide, did you want to say anything a little bit more? I think this needs to be aired a little bit.
About Otto Ambros, he was the IG Farm. He was an IG Farm director, and he was the director who was in charge of the construction of IG Auschwitz, and he was the person on the board for all new medicines and new compounds in IG Farben, and he was tried in Nuremberg, and he was one of the rare people who were really jailed in Nuremberg. And in Nuremberg, in the jail, he met Flick, which was one of the, well, he was the richest German industrialist, and they grew friends. And he later on kept advising Flick on, in particular, chemicals and medical companies.
Does that help answer some of your question? There's a lot of stuff.
And then the last thing, obviously, yes, we're all very angry, but obviously, if the German government eventually did say, yes, okay, we will aid, whatever. Personally, I would like to see Grunenthal brought down to the knees for the thousands of people who've died and parents who have died and who have suffered, because to me, they've never accepted responsibility.
So would we. The difficulty right now is that we can't focus attention on them. We have a plan. It's currently one page of A4, a lot of bullet points, but we have a plan to get Grunenthal once the German government... Because actually, you know what? The German government are pretty pissed off with Grunenthal as well. So one thing we haven't yet said... Sorry, I shouldn't say that, should I? You don't care, I don't care. The German government are not very impressed with Grunenthal. We had a meeting with someone from the German Families Ministry. Oh goodness, when was it? It wasn't this year, it was last year. A meeting with the German Families Ministry. They have direct links with, or direct, they occasionally have meetings with the director of Grunenthal. We were told by the German Families Minister that if he never saw the CEO from Grunenthal again, it would be too soon. They are not impressed. They can't get money from Grunenthal themselves. So there is no love lost between Grunenthal and the German Families Ministry. So we're convinced that once we get a breakthrough, that Grunenthal will be the next target. Martin's book's going to be really helpful, and various other things as well.
I know that we can't take on Grunenthal and the government, but I think more should be done to take on the grandchildren of these people. I think there should be more bad publicity directed towards them. They seem to be just sitting away at the back and nothing seems to be getting done to them. I know legally we can't do anything, but we can certainly apply more pressure to them in the public eye. In Germany.
I think all of us want to get Grunenthal. I don't think that's not in the question. At the moment, we have to focus on what our needs are. We're not going to get financial assistance from Grunenthal. We can get financial assistance from the German government. We can get our unmet health needs met. And that has to be our number one focus. But our eye is definitely still on Grunenthal. We just can't do it side by side because it will take our energy away from what we're needing to do now.
And of course, Martin Johnson and Ray Stokes are writing a book, which I know every time we come together, it feels like it's going to be in a few months' time, but that's simply because Tobias keeps unearthing new information, which it's not his fault because it makes the book even stronger. But this book is going to come out within the next 6 months, we believe, and that is going to be a major, major, major story. And Tobias is going to some French archives on Monday, from Monday to Wednesday, with a researcher from Panorama. And again, they think they've uncovered information again, which will embarrass Grunenthal. So we are amassing information. We are intending to go to battle with Grunenthal, most certainly, but we think we need to fight the German government battle first, for reasons Mikey has just... it's not like we're saying we won't do anything on the Grunenthal until we finish, because we are, but we just need to we need to focus on one thing at a time.
In an ideal world, if the German government were to give... In an ideal world, if the German government were to do something positive for us and all the rest of it, and everybody's happy and stuff like that, I still believe the family members at Grunenthal would just disappear into the background.
You're probably right, but we don't live in an ideal world.
Really following on from what you were saying, Craig, earlier, do you think the German government would help us bring Grunenthal to justice?
That's a very good
because
question.
Grunenthal appear to be so invulnerable, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, you can't speak on behalf of somebody else, can you? But certainly we have had hints that German politicians are very frustrated. Not just at the way Grunenthal have dealt with us, but the way Grunenthal have dealt with them over the years. The way Grunenthal are refusing to provide more money for Germans, when they uplifted their settlement. I mean, we know they got their own foundation and whatever else, but the German government are very frustrated they haven't taken their responsibility. So it may well be, but we don't know.
I want to just say thank you for all of this information. It's really made the picture much clearer for me. And I just can't wait to see the book and read it. It seems, I thought it would have been finished earlier, but I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to reading the book, and I just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you. It's not really a question, but it's just thinking ahead and thinking about the future and the risk, which I'm sure you've thought of, which is that if we are successful in getting a settlement and agreement from the German government, that the UK government will say, oh, well, that's it. We don't need to renew the health grant, because the current health grant is only for 10 years. And I think what that suggests to me is that it's really important that we keep on emphasising unmet needs, the growing costs of growing older with thalidomide damage. So there is absolutely no risk that in 6, 7 years' time, when the time comes to renew the UK health grant, that they don't say, oh, well, you're getting money from Germany now, we don't need to bother.
Thanks, Caroline. I think that's a really valid point that you raised. I think we need to remember in 2012, when Norman Lamb announced in the House of Commons about the extension of the health grant, he recognised that that the health grant still leaves us with unmet health needs. And we all know about securing our future, where quite a few thalidomiders wrote down their daily cost of living with their disability. And what we established was it's now 2-3 years old, unbelievably, but we found that the average cost, the cost of the average thalidomider, and that was across all levels, was on average of £42,000 a year. What we found by chance that the health grant gives out to the average thalidomider is about £21,000 a year. So the British government know that the health grant that they give us only covers 50% of our needs, and it's that other 50% that we're going after the German government for, because we can actually quantify that. I mean, we'd all like to go after the German government for a hell of a lot more money, but you can't go after something that you can't quantify and you can't prove that is needed. We're not going after compensation, we're going after health needs, and that will make it, that they're very clear, the British government is already very clear about that point.
Just saying, are we doing this also for our European thalidomide partners as well?
Very much so, which is the reason we took them to Parliament. And again, one of my roles is to continue liaising with all of the groups. So I regularly give them updates as to what we're doing, and we're encouraging them currently to form alliances with various local politicians within their own country. So we're also continuing to advise the Spanish, Italians and Swedes and to work with them on ensuring that they have support within their own countries. So yes, most definitely.
Right. My question is, Mikey, have you got a figure that you're actually going for, and how is it going to work? Similar to the health grant, or is it a one-off payment?
The figure is going to be, is it 8 million? in the UK? 8 million to the trust. 10 million to 8 million to the trust.
I don't know what it
breaks down into.
Breaks down into. But what we're saying to the German government is, look, all the evidence shows that we have unmet health needs of 21,000 here in the UK. We need to be asking for a similar amount. You can't ask, can't offer one amount in Spanish and one for the Italians and whatever. So we've got the Italians, Swedes, and us, and Spanish and ourselves agreeing that what we're asking for is equivalent of £21,000 a year, which is 28,000 euros. So we everywhere we go, we talk about 28,000 euros per annum. But of course, we don't know what the German government might say, oh, here's a pot of money distributed amongst yourselves. And we then have to decide, well, is it worth fighting, for exactly what we want, or is an amount that they're willing to give us as a one-off, is that actually, all we're going to get? So you might ask for one thing, but we don't know what they might come back to us and what their first offer might be. So we recognise we're probably not going to get what we're asking for exactly, because you never do. Our starting point is 28,000 euros per year for every thalidomide-affected person outside the Kontergan Stiftung. But who knows? That's where we're starting.
And that is on the average figure. Okay, so obviously it goes down and the figure goes up according to the point system. Okay.
And if we get it, and if we get it, is it going to be worked out by the trust and allocated through that way?
That's always the intention, yes, so that we have control of the money ourselves. Yes, through the point system.